Hello and welcome to episode 4 now of this YouTube video workshop series on harp ornamentation. My name's Karen Marshalsay and this week we're going to be looking at one main thing, which is probably one of my favourite things that I love doing. I know I keep saying this, but this is a particular favourite. And it's what I call a gurgle, a gurgly. It's a two-handed composite decoration that I originally learned from Alison Kinnaird, and she does a description of it in her blue book, The Small Harp Tutor, which was my first tutor book. That's what I started playing on all those years back, and it's still really relevant and I could highly recommend it. Even if you're not a beginner, there's so much in that book. Tunes, style, ornamentation. It's a wealth of information, so I can highly recommend that book for you. And it's something that I've probably played around with for almost all the time I've been playing the harp, to be honest. But in the past, certainly in the past 20 years, it's something that I've really taken on board and explored a lot in my playing and developed and worked into how to create a rippling effect, a gurgling, rippling effect that really builds up your harmony, gives a layering effect, and ultimately in my head what I'm looking for is a type of pibroch effect, that piping drone that's built up with these ever increasing ringing grace notes and ringing drones, which we are using the grace notes to ring out for. So two-handed composite decorations, or gurglies as I call them, is the main feature of this week. We will look at a couple of other things. We have a little study exercise, a study tune that's starting to bring together some of the things we've looked at in the first 3 episodes. So if you haven't watched the first 3, I would highly recommend that you go back and do that, because this little exercise is going to bring together cuts, bees plaits, a thumb choke, a couple of other things. Crossing the 3rd finger over the 4th finger is one of the things that sneaks into that exercise. It's not really an ornamentation, but it's just my fingering the way I and many other traditional players play. And another little movement, which is a little doublet run, if you like, a run of 2 grace notes, and I'm damping out that middle one. So all of those things are going to come into a study, which we're then going to do a gurgly variation for to that study tune. And we're also going to look at gurgly variations on a couple of other tunes. I've got 2 harps for you here this week. I have my big red Raven, modern levered clarsach. Mine is strung with gut and it's fairly lightly strung and fairly closely spaced, but obviously, as ever, everything that you do, you think about it, you observe it, you try it out, you experiment with it, and ultimately you probably have to adapt it to the harp that you play. It may have a different string spacing, it might have a different string tension, your hands are going to be a different size to my hands. All these things have to be taken into account, and only you can make those observations and decisions for yourself. So the main thing I'm looking for is that you are interested and that you experiment and try these things out to see what you can do. I'm also going to be playing on my small wire-strung harp this week. I have a small 19-string Kilcoy, an Ardeval Kilcoy harp that I'm going to be looking at on some of the tunes. So let's get started. Let's just break it down. Basically, the basic movement is that you have octaves on the outside with this middle string, so the 5th up or the 4th down, whichever way you want to think about it. Your hands are going to be working together. It's a two-handed composite decoration, remember, and they're going to be sharing this middle string. So I'm playing with my right hand high and my left hand low. Obviously, if you play in the left shoulder, you just reverse everything. So my top hand, my right hand, is going to come down the D to the A. My bass hand, which is my left hand, is coming up from the D an octave lower to the same A. And my melody hand, my right hand, is simply going to go back to this top A and punch it out. But if if you notice, I bring my finger back on to that middle A that's been ringing to damp it out. So it's down, up, top and damp. You want to build it up like everything else. You practice it really slowly, steadily, deliberately in a really controlled manner. And then you gradually speed it up until you get that lovely ripple. You can hear that I'm punching out that thumb note. This is going to be my main melody note. You've always got to know in your head what you're playing. Are you playing grace notes? Are you playing tune notes? If you don't know, then your listeners aren't going to be able to know. So always play with intention, the notes, as you intend them to be heard. Okay, so obviously you don't just play it with octaves and the fifth in the middle. In the same way as I spoke in right from the start in episode 1, harps ring out, and if you leave your grace notes ringing, they're going to create harmony, and this is what this does as well. It creates this shimmer, this rippling, shimmering effect, and you can build up a piping-like drone as well. So here I'm letting the octaves ring out. There's all sorts of ways that you could practice that. You could do it on scales if you want to. I'll let you work that out for yourselves. It would be very simple. You could do it over different intervals. Something like that might work. That was over the A's, over the D's, over the C's, back to the A's. You could do it in different octaves. Create your own exercises like we've been talking about in the previous 3 weeks. Let's look at a little study exercise. So this will give us a chance to practice other decorations that we've been working on in the past 3 weeks. This, like all of these episodes, they are kind of standalone episodes, but they build on each other. So if you're not familiar with things that I'm talking about like cuts or thumb chokes, I would recommend you go back and have a listen to episode 1 and 2 and 3 as well. This is probably a good point just to remind you, there are downloads, PDF sheet music downloads that go along with these. These videos are all free to watch, and there's a small charge to download the sheet music and the accompanying material if you'd like to do that. There's a link in the description down below. It'd be great if you could do that. It helps support me and helps me keep creating these free materials. So let's have a look at a little study for ourselves rather than just playing a scale. On there that we've looked at in previous weeks. We're cutting up the G to the D, cutting up the B to C, that's one we've not actually looked at in any great detail. You're really just doing a little 2-note rundown. That's your main note, that's your tune notes. I'm just playing a little B and an A, a little doublet rundown. If you do all of that, remember your middle notes ring out. So I bring my thumb onto that middle one just to clean it up a little bit. If you're familiar with thumb chokes, it's as if you're playing your thumb first, 2 and 3 come on, and then you're going to do a thumb choke. But it just runs really quickly and smoothly together. You might just want to think about it as a 1, 2, 3 run with your thumb damping out that middle note. Jumping off at a slight tangent here, but obviously you can do little exercises for that on its own, but here we've got it in the middle of something. So we go back to the G, and we're going to do a bass plat up to the D, cut down D to C, and then we're just coming up straight. So that phrase from the G. What we've done so far. Thumbs now on this D, you're going to come down. So that in itself is a good little practice for this little doublet rundown. You're doing 1, 2, and you're going back to play them again as grace notes on the way to that low note. And it's quite handy that you're bringing your thumb onto that middle note to damp it out, because that's the next tune note you're going to play. Thumbs on the B, and that's where we're going to start. We're going to play B and cut B to A. Just down A to D there, you can play it with your third or your fourth. Probably quite good to play the fourth if you want to, because I know, I've not told you yet, but I know we're coming up to this octave here. Then we're going to do, you can do a little cut, but that leaves it ringing, so it'd be a nice place to put in a thumb choke. Does mean you have to move your hand a little bit more. So remember, it is one of the things we have spoken about. Adding in grace notes does change your fingering. You just have to be really clear in your head what's going on, where you're going to. Really think about it when you're practicing. When is your hand on the strings? When is your hand moving? I'm off, I'm back on again. I need to come off, but it's not a big step, so I don't want to come off and go all the way out here. Everything's quite close into the harp. You don't need to do the big grand pedal harp gestures, because these harps aren't strung as tightly as pedal harps. If you are on a levered clarset that is on full concert tension, you might have to modify what I'm saying here and do a little bit of more movement. But like everything, you have to adjust what's going on to yourself, your physical shape, the shape of your hands, your height, everything, and your harp, and you've got to adjust it to your harp. So let's stick the thumb choke in. So you then move down. This is a little rundown that I'm just letting everything ring out, and we're going to go to this G. It's not really ornamentation related, but just to let you know what I'm doing here is something that is I do quite often. A lot of traditional players do, a lot of Irish players do it as well. Traditional Irish players as well as Scottish players. I'm crossing my third finger over my fourth. I'm just pointing out because I've done it in a few workshops, and more classically oriented or trained players kind of look at you and go, what did you just do there? Did you just cross a finger over another finger? Yeah, it really works. So I'm doing that. Four, 3, 2, and 1 to finish. So that, if you like, is an exercise that you could just think of. That's the bare bones of it, with all that decoration stripped out. It might be useful for you to practice that first, listen to it, have a think about it. I'll go through it with the ornamentation that I've just shown you. So that's a really good thing to practice on its own, and I would highly recommend you work on that. I'll play it through once more, a little bit slower, if you want to join me with it. Let's do it again. Okay, so we're now going to use that to explore these gurglies. So, our first one is my basic standard gurgly, octaves with that fifth in the middle, and we're on G's. Now your thumbs got to jump from that main note to this one. This is what we're going to do here, just a little run up. This gurgle here is still ringing out. I'm going to go to the C there. You might want to think about, just remind yourself what the skeleton, what are the bones of what you're playing. Now, this is an example here. You're not always going to be on octaves with that fifth up from the bass. This time we're on octave A's, but it's D that we're sharing in the middle. And then we're moving down octave G's, but it's the same D in the middle. On a gut harp, you don't really need to worry too much about those. Having these two adjacent strings ringing out. If you're on a wire harp, you would need to do something slightly different to get rid of them. I would do something along these lines, which is simply anchoring my fingers of my bass hand so that here my third finger, I'll do it with this hand, my third finger, 3 and 1, it's following a bracketed 3 in a coupled hands octave. If you're aware of Anne Hayman's book, for example, on this method, this is an Anne Hayman technique, coupled hands for harpers. Again, coupled hands is something we're going to talk about a bit later on, or possibly in a completely different series, who knows. But that's a great book if you're a wire-strung player and you want to explore this method. And what it does is because I've played that there, and as I go to play the lower string, I bring my third finger back on. Would also work if you wanted to play it that way, 2 and 3. So, and I would just adjust my fingering to get rid of that A at the top by damping it with my thumb and putting my second finger G on it. If I were on a wire strung harp. On this one, I'm just going to let it ring out. Or actually, the more I play this, I quite like damping it out, but it's your choice. So we've done this. Let's do that once more. It's another way of doing it, just putting 3 and 2 on. So I'm damping that A out with my second finger. Lots of options here, talking about changing of fingerings. Now we're going to add in a downward chord because we have all these strings on this harp. I might not do that on a smaller wire strung harp, but here I'm on this harp, so I'm going to do that. And then add the gurgly. So downward chord. Downward chord, you're literally just breaking down from the top to the bottom instead of coming up from the bottom to the top. It's the same thing, your melody note comes at the end of the chord. Da ba da da. Then we have our gurgly. Hand jumps up, D, C. We're going to do a run up again. D, G, with the bass hand up to the B. We're going to bring it down a little bit. We've come up D, G, B. We're now going to come up E, G, C. Just a little bit of a quiet moment there. So this is what we've done from the beginning. Remember, the tune at this point was going. And we played it with little doublet runs and then a cut. So here we're going to try this. We're still on a G gurgly, but we're coming down D, G and coming up G, D. So we've spread it out. Coming down, D, G, and coming up, G, D. So we're not actually sharing a string this time. We've spread it out. There's always possibilities. Cut, D to C. Remember I said this is, you're creating your harmony with your ornamentation. We're now going to go C, G, down, C, G, up. So it's back to your standard octaves with fifth in the middle. And we've come in narrower again. Here we're coming down, B, G, and we're coming up, B, D. So the first one was this wide one, G's and D's. Cut, standard, C, G, gurgly, cut, nice narrow, B, G, B, D, cut. So here we've gone back to one we've done before, A octaves on the outside and the D in the middle. But I'm going to go down just to fill that chord out. So this run becomes Jump up our thumbs to this top D, and we're coming down D, G, and we're going to come up D, G. So it's octave Ds, but it's an inverted gurgly if you want to think about it that way, because it's really a G gurgly. And up to the D. And we're going to do the whole thing again. But you can add in a little bit of extra spice down below if you like and double some of these melody notes. So we have the gurgle again, C and B are going to be echoed an octave lower, the cut's only coming in the top hand. We're on the home straight now. We're going to do our standard GD, GD. Nice big downward chord to finish. So this time it's a slightly different type because it's a two-handed chord. You're literally starting at the top, playing each note on the way down. But you still want to think about it because my beat's going to fall in that note. That last phrase, let's have a look at it. So there's quite a lot going on in that little exercise. Let's play it through. Okay, so that gives you an awful lot to work on to practice up gurglies, looking at the basic movement, the basic idea, theory behind it, if you like. Practicing it in what I think of as my basic one with octaves and that fifth in the middle. Remember that as a traditional player, I very rarely have the thirds in my chords. That octave with that fifth is what I think of as my standard chord. And then we've looked at adapting that so that sometimes you're just doing two notes up, or you're spreading it wider and you don't have a shared note in the middle, or you're bringing it in closer. You're changing, you might have the octaves with that fourth because you've inverted it, if you like. So you're changing the actual notes that you play in your gurgle to suit your harmony. In the same way, you should be thinking about that all the time whenever you're doing your grace note. So there's an awful lot that you can really work on in that piece. And you might find it a lot easier in this week in particular to download the handout, I think, and actually have a look at it. I notate it in a particular way. The gurglies are written as grace notes. I write them as like two beams, if you like. So it's a semi-quaver grace note. And if I'm playing them with my right hand, or which is my melody hand, the stems are going up the way. If I'm playing them with my bass hand, which is my left hand, the stems are going down the way. So you can see this two-handed interaction. I think that visual thing is quite important. So I would recommend, even if you're playing all of this by ear, to have a look at the handout this week. this way of playing with this, what I call the gurgly, or the two-handed composite decoration, really suits some older material, Gaelic material, piping, pibroch-esque, pibroch tunes, pibroch songs, things you're trying to play in that manner. It really works very well. Obviously you have subtle differences depending on the harp you're playing. On the wire-strung harp, the strings really ring out a long time when you want to use that. You might not put in as many gurglies, as many decorations as you might on a gut harp, because you need to work harder to keep those strings ringing on a gut harp. Here, for example, this is a Gaelic song, Cath and Ruaridh, Killiecrankie, and the melody itself is very simple. And that's it. It's a beautifully simple, haunting melody. On the wire strings, it really rings out, and I think it really suits the wire-strung harp. But obviously you can play it on any harp. When I actually play this piece, I use something called coupled hands, which we'll talk about in another episode. But just to give you a demonstration, I might do something like this. So you can hear that in a couple of places I did this. It was a long note. I'd just done 1, 2, then you're coming in with the same note again. So I've done the first beat, and I'm going to fill in with one of these gurglies. So you can also, you can do that, you can do a filling in, and it's a case of coming down, coming up. Generally, the simplest thing to look at is octaves on the outside with that fifth up from the bass in the middle, and that's going to be a shared string. So I'm coming down with my top hand, up with my bass hand, back to my thumb note. I do bring my thumb, as I play my thumb, I bring my finger on to damp that middle note out. It flings a bit of emphasis and clarity, which is the important thing, onto the main thumb note. And that's the theme note or the melody note or the tune note. It's the important note. That's the one you really want to think about. And you're left with this burble or gurgle that just rings on beautifully. So you can use it that way, just to fill in one of these long notes. It's one of these things on the harp. It's like, you know, a fiddler can play it beautifully. A fiddler can just do that big, long, expressive sound. What do we do on harps? This is one idea. You can also take that, and again, following the pibroch model, you've got your theme notes quite strongly in your head, and what you're going to do is you're going to decorate them. So you can do a series of burbles. Remember, this tune is simple. With the occasional fill. Now I'm going to use this idea of a gurgle, a two-handed composite decoration, to flesh that out. So what I've done there is I've done my first gurgle on the A's, coming down AE, coming up AE, going back to that A, damping in the middle note. I'm going to do a similar gurgle, but I've simplified it slightly. I'm just coming up AE, that top A on the way up to the C. My melody notes have been, and what I've played. My next two melody notes are again C's. So I'm going to do a gurgle up to the C. Similar idea, I've pulled that gurgle wider a little bit. Instead of going, it's awkward, it's kind of a funny jump. So we're going to do, coming down from the C, C to A, come up A to E. Because I'm on a wire harp here, if I do too many gurgles too quickly, the ring just gets a little bit overpowering, and it's nice to bring a little bit of clarity. So on this occasion, I'm going to double melody notes. So up to now we've done. So the next phrase, I'm going to do my basic gurgle up to the A, down AE, up AE. I'm playing this as a fork choke, if you remember that from episode 1. If you don't, go back and have a look. Now, the melody note here is a D. I'm doing two grace notes on the way down, playing them with a thumb choke. They are my grace notes. I'm splitting this between hands partly because I'm on a small wire harp. Done a chord there. But again, I'm going to fill it in with that little gurgle. Now, you have to choose your notes for your gurgle, obviously, very carefully. I'm on a small harp here and I want to work in quite close proximity to each other with all these notes. I've just played one on basically an E minor, octave E's with a B in the middle. Because I'm damping that middle anyway, all that's ringing are the E's, so it's very easy to move from that to this. I'm just changing to the A rather than the B. Gone for a straight chord there. So that gives you an idea of how you can use this two-handed composite decoration, or gurgly, as a variation for an entire part on a wire-strung harp. So let's have a very quick look at that Cath and Ruaridh tune, the Killiecrankie tune that I demonstrated on the wire-strung harp, and look at how we might play it, that gurgly variation, on the gut-strung harp. One of the things I might do, partly because that was a small 19-string harp and it was all played up here, is I may well just move it down an octave first, rather than. Again, this is it's small. It's only 8 bars. This Gaelic song, the music for it. So you're going to be playing it quite a few times in an arrangement. So you may well play it up the octave and down the octave, all sorts of different places on your harp, and it's really good to experiment with that with your arrangements. But let's look at it down the octave, because we looked at it up here on the wire-strung harp. So exactly the same thing would be like this. But I'm to do something slightly different and add in something down there at this point. Quite quiet, but I've just gone down to that low A to add that in. I like that doubling on the gut strung as well. I think it's a really strong thing to do. So we've done this. So I'm going to carry on as we did on the wire harp. On the wire harp I did this. I might decide here I'm going to bring in a few more of my lower strings. It's basically the same thing that I'm going for, I'm just catching that low D. Straight to it, running up the D and the A. If you want a little bit more of a rhythmic effect, do the thumb choke first. You can do the same gurgle there. So we've just done this gurgle on the E and the B. The wire version, we just went to that A rather than the B and kept the E's on the outside, and I think that's quite a nice subtle thing to do. You want to not get into too many patterns. I've probably said this somewhere else in the video this week. I say it quite a lot. Patterns, you build them up and you build them up and you build them up, and then you need to break them and have a break in that pattern, otherwise your effect is lost. So instead of doing something like that, or just going to keep it simple, you could hit the low A if you like, and I may well do that. And I've just done a little bit of punctuation. Something I don't think we've mentioned, or we might have done. Taking something away, taking a sound away can be as effective as adding another sound or note in. So, let's look at what we did there. That was just a D and an A, same as on the wire. Jump back up again. So that would be a way of playing what we played on that small wire-strung harp on this levered clarsach. There's always ways, you always have to adapt things to suit the instrument that you're on. Uamh and Oire, the Cave of Gold. Remember, the tune is very simple. I'm going to play it up the octave here. It's nice long notes we need to do something with. Again, on this harp, it's absolutely fine. You can also do those open fifths or fourths down below. If you want to do a little bit of an echo, I would bring my thumb up to slide down there. Going to the G and the D. Back to the D and the A. D and G. doing your gurgly. So let's have a look at what we actually did there. This is a great one to think about, these two-handed decorations. Remember, your basic is you're coming down. We've got octaves with that fifth up from the bass in the middle. Coming down with our top hand, up with the bottom hand, back up to that top note. And when you do hit that top note, it's really good to bring in a finger to damp out that middle note. You pretty much have to do it on a wire harp, I think, to get clarity. But I do it on all harps. Same principle, all harps ring out. It's good to get that little bit of emphasis on the top note as well. So clean it up, make sure you're putting the emphasis on the notes that you want it on. So we have what I think of as the basic one first. Octaves with the fifth in the middle. So this time it's D's on the outside, A in the middle. Down, up. I think of down, up, up. This one's really just playing the top note. That's the basic one, but you can't always do that. Tune notes move, remember, because here we have D to F to A. Then we're going G, a little F, G, back up to the A. Slight difference on this phrase, G, G, F. So those are our themes that we're using. Always have to keep really strongly in your head which are your theme notes, what's your melody notes, your tune notes, your main notes, however you want to think about them. They're on the beat and everything else is a rhythmic gurgle that's coming before it. It's all in a D minor chord. Remember, our theme notes are playing around D, playing around that triad. So we have our standard octaves with fifth in the middle. That low D can be left ringing. Here we're coming up to what's really a second inversion, so I'm coming down F, D, and I'm coming up A, D. Still damping out the penultimate note before your main note. So we've done. This time you can move straight up to the little triad. Now remember, our theme notes here are so we're going to do our basic octaves with fifth in the middle on a G chord. If you do gurglies all the time, it gets too much. So here I'm going to go straight to a main note there and then come up. So full, down, up, up, main note on its own, come up. Now we're going to move up here and play this one. So it's like your grace notes. If you're leaving them ringing, choose them carefully to make sure they give you the harmony that you want. So here I'm coming up D and an A. I'm going to come down C to A, C, A, come up D, A. I'm going to damp out that C and leave the A ringing. So it's a slightly different pattern. This is what we've done. We start repeating. I've broken the pattern here. It's a really good thing to do. Don't ever let yourself get into too much of a repetitive pattern. You want to break it at some point. So here I've just done our standard, played the second theme note, and I'm just going to cut down, but I want to get rid of it, so I'm playing it as a thumb choke. Remember episode 1? Ending on the standard gurgly. So obviously what you can do is you wouldn't just go straight into that, you would build it up. I would build this up with a simple tune, adding in some grace notes, a little bit more left hand, build up to this as being the high point, and then I would bring the arrangement back down again. I do play this on my levered gut-strung harp. I'll do have a video of me in performance with it. I'll dig that out and probably put that up on YouTube separately and score that up just to give you an idea as well. Not for this handout, which remember you can get from my download store, and I'll put the link in the description down below. You've heard this on the wire harp. Please, if you don't play wire harp, don't just suddenly switch off and think, oh, that's wire harp stuff, because honestly this works for all harps, and I can't encourage you enough just to experiment with the harp that you have, or the harps that you have, and try all these different things out. You can do that same gurgly variation, Uamh and Oire, on your lever harp. Just to remind ourselves, in the past we've been doing also had the option to go down and add in a low D. Just to fill that space out. So now let's have a look at the exact same gurgly variation as we played on the wire-strung harp, but an octave lower. Up the octave. You could also keep some of those fills in if you like. To turn that fill into a full chord. So here I'm just playing octave Ds with an A in the middle, but I'm breaking it downwards, and that's something we'll have a wee exercise for in another episode. Gives a really good effect, I think, and a really good atmospheric feel. So, but we'll talk about them in the future. 5 and Oire we've looked at on both harps now. And again, it's a piece that I really encourage you to explore. I do have a performance that I've filmed of this. I'll put it up separately on YouTube on this lever harp. And it's played on the lever harp, and it goes from very simple haunting at the beginning, and I'm playing it through and I'm layering up and adding in different sets of grace notes leading up to gurgly variations and pulling it back down again. So I'll put that up as a separate video on YouTube, and I'll get the arrangement scored out as well in the not too distant future and put that up in my shop, but that's a slightly separate thing. You've got the basic tune, you've got the lots of ideas for ornamentation, so you could experiment with it. Or any other simple tune. There are loads of these. This tune I got from Francis Tolmie's collection, and that and things like the Angus Fraser collection are great sources of tunes, Gaelic origin tunes, often songs or fragments of songs that are really ripe for this approach, if you like. So have fun with it.